being smart, some of you are already remarking to yourselves, so far 2020, it's been all about difficulty breathing, first coronavirus and then George Floyd. What's up with that? Something's going on. Well, you're right. Something is going on and it just saved your ass. Let's find out exactly what. This is The Beautiful Truth. You are on the next level. This is The Beautiful Truth, where the expression is still free.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5.
And you are very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth with Fintan Dunne reporting. And first, let's just give hats off and heads up to the guy who saved our asses. It was just 2 weeks ago, on the 25th of May, that George Floyd had his life so publicly taken from him. And it was a signal event which effectively brought an end to the COVID fear hysteria. What's up with that? Check this out too. This really says it the same, doesn't it? The same sentiment, I can't breathe, that constriction, that sense of constraint. And so there is something deep going on here, but in order to solve that, we've got to go to the next level on this. And the next level we can get to by first just take a look at this and tell me what you think of the difference between these two. This and this. So what's the difference between this and this? Maybe you can guess. The answer is quite simple, really. The answer is a few years. Ta-da! You see, it always starts off like this. And it always ends up like this. And there's always very good reasons for it starting like this. And then there's also really, really good reasons for it ending like this. You know what I'm talking about. It's backwardness in cultural development. It's absolutely recessive what's been going on. And also it is collective. You see, Muslim society, I would say, is an example of the collective. And the origin of this virus in China, in general, the East is collective and the West is individualistic, culminating in the furthest west you can get, which is California. And that always was the exploratory spirit heading west, of course. So these are the underlying trends which have been, these are socio-psychological, socio-symbolic trends which have been playing out in this. And unless you take that into account, you really can't understand what's been going on. But the liberal Western woman has been the target of cultivation of fear for the purposes of social control and for the purposes of the development of collectivism. That's what's been going on. And that dynamic of conflict between collectivism and individualism also plays out in the political domain, where the individualism of Trump is compared with the collectivism of the Democrats. We're also watching a battle play out between the individualism of the leader versus the collectivism of the masses. We're seeing a battle play out between the individualism of the male versus the collectivism of the female. All of these trends have been playing out in 2020 so far. So what we had was the deliberate cultivation of this phenomenon of masking, etc., which had been already well developed previously in previous tests of this, just to see how it would play out socially. So that's quite deliberate and cognizant. And it was seeded in China for a purpose, because those who seeded this want that model of social control to extend out into Europe and into North America. That was the aim. And that aim was, it was experiencing some difficulty. There was spirited resistance coming from here and there. But it was getting its way right up until the day that George Floyd was murdered. And that, if you like, was a collective response. From the collective unconscious, it was a social response. So again, just contextualizing this for you. Again, we're contextualizing back that what is playing out here now is mythic. And the battle between the male energy of Donald Trump and the female energy of Hillary Clinton was an epic political battle where these two polar opposites, which I've outlined, which have a sexual in terms of masculine and feminine, a political in terms of individualistic versus collectivist behavior, and a socio-psychological in terms of whether one covers oneself or whether one loses one's individuality in fear or whether one expresses confidently one's individuality in freedom. So those political, social dynamics have been rebalancing in terms of masculine and feminine energy over the last 40 years. And what we are in now is a period where there has been and is ongoing political exploitation of the rebalancing dynamic between masculine and feminine energies. And that has risen to a natural climax, excuse me, given the time that we're in, a natural climax which involved Donald Trump representing male energy and Hillary Clinton representing female energy. And those who had a political bet, if you like, in the collectivist camp and in feminine energy, the collective is important. See, what's important also is balance here between the two. So those who had their political hopes pinned on continuing this rebalancing in favor of the feminine were shocked to find that in actual fact it didn't transpire. Because in fact, the system requires rebalancing in the opposite direction. And that's what's so politically unpalatable about Donald Trump, is that he represents that alpha male energy. I mean, worst of all, alpha male. This is absolutely the last thing that the collectivist dynamic needs, wants. And so that's been the backdrop. So what did happen then is that George Floyd came along. And George Floyd was the victim of what? And certainly not of a racial prejudice alone. Although racial prejudice is now being used as a tool by those who have jumped ship from the sinking COVID ship onto the good ship civil rights, which is old territory that they can use to try and mobilize resistance to the orange man. Because that's what it's all been about. So if COVID won't take the orange man down, well then maybe civil rights outrage will take the orange man down. But it had nothing to do with that. That's just what happened to them. On the way to their COVID dreams, George Floyd happened. And it didn't happen for reasons of race. It happened because this was the conflict between authoritarianism and the individual playing out. So George Floyd may have been many things, but he was certainly an individual. A very individual character, I think you will agree. History will judge him so. And he represented the individual in that moment. And he represented the individual who fully expressed all of that inability to breathe and constraint. And it was witnessed in the modern era, and so aptly, by a young woman with a cell phone, who along with George then proceeded to change the course of history. Suddenly, repression had a face. Suddenly, repression had a victim. Suddenly, there was general public revulsion. And in that moment, the media jumped immediately, realizing that may have lost their COVID opportunity, but here was another opportunity. And so, off we went. But of course, the COVID hysteria, fear operation never really recovered. Because suddenly people were on the streets. Suddenly it was about defending the individual. Suddenly it wasn't about the collective at all. It wasn't about the anonymity of the eyes behind the mask. Suddenly it was very much about an individual. So none of this has anything to do with whether you vote Trump or whether you vote Democrat or what. These are huge socio-psychological dynamics playing out. And what's interesting is that the collective unconscious generated a termination of that COVID thing. It was holed below the waterline by what happened. And in that moment, there, as I said, had already been a backlash. There already was something underway. But in that moment then, and moving into that space from the 25th onwards, masculine energy was going to reassert itself. And again, it was a masculine individual whose life had been terminated by this authoritarianism in specific, but in general, in terms of its cultural implications. And what better reassertion of masculine energy? It's always been that assertion of masculine energy so characteristic of the United States is the missile, is the launch, is the penis symbol. And within days, this had happened.
2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA. Go SpaceX. Godspeed. Spot and dog. Vehicle pitching down range. 1 Alpha. Copy. 1 Alpha. Stage 1 propulsion.
There you go. And so we were off. And so we were again reaching boldly for the future, not cowering. That's what this has been all about. It's been as simple as that. It's been as mythic. It's been as symbolic. And the only reason really that things can ever get that symbolic, that epic, is because this is a breakthrough moment. These are tumultuous times. These are incredible forces which are coming in conflict with each other and which will achieve resolution. What I think you can take out of this, and it's hopeful, is that this is how it played out. I mean, that was their best shot, and it was going so well right up until the collective unconscious spoke and Trump moved into the vacuum following the implosion of the support for authoritarianism and collectivism. And we had the successful launch, and momentum was lost on the side of those who'd hoped to keep the fear going. In fact, Lafayette, North Carolina, almost everything there is named the Cape Fear, this, that, and the other, because of course Cape Fear is in North Carolina. And that Falcon 9 flew over Cape Fear as it headed northwards to rendezvous with the International Space Station. Interesting times, folks. I've just dealt with this much of it in order to contextualize it properly for you. But we really dodged a bullet there in a way, if you want to put it one way. If you want to be much more optimistic, and I am as a result of what happened, our ability to dodge that bullet wasn't just accidental. It was totally epic. And it augurs well for the future. Let's see how it goes. We haven't got rid of these people on the political and the pharmaceutical front. There's horrible stuff going on, which I will address in future videos. But for now, I'm just going to celebrate the human spirit. I'm going to commiserate with those who have lost, all of those who have lost, including those who lost when George Floyd lost his life. And I'm going to wish you all the best and look forward to some more interesting times in 2020. I'll be back to cover them. I'll be back with all of that, and I hope you can join me for it. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.